She manipulated our divorce to steal $250, $0 in stake claim to our family home. The worst betrayal came after I found out she had a secret affair with my best friend. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. The craziest thing happened, stuff I'd never imagined in a million years. It all started with little signs that I brushed off at first, but looking back, they should have been the biggest red flags. My wife Lisa had always been a bit manipulative. She's good at twisting things to her advantage, but I never suspected she'd go as far as she did. We'd been married for about 7 years. I thought we had a solid life, 2 kids, a nice house, decent jobs. I worked as a project manager at a construction firm and Lisa was a real estate agent. Things weren't perfect, but I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. She was always bitchy when I'd bring up the idea of us saving for the future or planning big purchases, but I figured that was just her personality. She liked to control the money, but I never suspected she'd do anything shady. It all started when I noticed her phone was acting weird. She'd hide it when I walked into the room, and sometimes she'd get really defensive if I asked who she was texting. She'd brush it off, saying I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust her. But then I started noticing little things, her phone charging at odd hours, her deleting messages, and her going out more often with her friends, which was normal. But the way she'd come back late and nervous made me suspicious. One night I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know, big mistake, but I was desperate. I found a message thread with a guy named Mark. It was obvious they'd been talking intimately, and I saw pictures of her in bed with him, kissing him and talking about how much she missed him when they weren't together. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. Lisa, my wife, was having an affair with my best friend. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'd always trusted her, and now I saw her lying, cheating, sneaking around behind my back. I was furious, but I also felt betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before. I didn't sleep that night, just stared at the ceiling trying to process what I had found. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face for so long? And with Mark of all people, someone I'd known since college, someone I thought was my friend. The next day I confronted her. I wanted to hear her explain herself, to see if she'd admit the truth. I told her I knew about her affair, showed her the messages I had discovered. Her face went pale and she started to deny everything. At first, "It's not what it looks like," she said. "You're overthinking this," or "It's just a mistake, we're not serious." But I pressed her and she finally broke down and admitted she'd been seeing Mark for a few months. She said she was unhappy, that I was never enough, and that Mark made her feel alive again. That's when everything changed. The pain, the anger, the sense of betrayal, it was all overwhelming. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest repeatedly. I couldn't believe I had been blind to all of this, that my wife had been lying to me for so long and that she'd been sneaking around with someone I trusted. The worst part, she tried to manipulate the situation, saying she was the victim, that I wasn't enough for her emotionally, and that she needed someone who could give her what I couldn't. It was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, rage, heartbreak. I wanted to lash out, but I knew I had to stay calm. I knew I had to figure out what to do next, but I also knew this was just the beginning. The real game was about to start, and I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not after what I'd found out. After that confrontation, everything changed. I felt like I was walking around in a fog, trying to process how my life had been turned upside down by the woman I loved. Lisa kept insisting it was just a fling, a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to happen. She cried, begged for forgiveness, said she was sorry she hurt me, but I could see the lies in her eyes. She was good at lying, better than I ever thought possible, and the more she begged, the angrier I got. I started digging into her finances. I needed to know exactly how deep this went, especially since I had my suspicions that she was manipulating our money. It turns out, I was right. I found out she'd been secretly funneling money into accounts I didn't know about $250, $0 to be exact. She manipulated our divorce proceedings, claiming we'd agreed to split everything equally, but in reality, she'd already made off with a huge chunk of our savings. She'd also staked claim to our family home. insisting she was entitled to it because she deserved something for all her sacrifices. I was stunned. The woman I thought I knew had been orchestrating this entire betrayal behind my back. She'd been lying, cheating, and scheming for months. And she'd used our divorce as a way to steal from me, steal from us, while pretending to be the victim. I couldn't believe how manipulative she was. She had me convinced she was the wronged wife, when in reality, she was the one who'd been orchestrating her escape plan with Mark all along. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she'd been planning this for a while. She used her charm and her bitchy attitude to keep me off balance, to make me doubt myself. She'd lie about her whereabouts, say she was working late or out with friends, but she was really with Mark, or worse, scheming how to take my money and run. I decided I couldn't let her get away with it. I wanted justice. I wanted to teach her a lesson she'd never forget, so I started planning my revenge. Not the childish kind, something smarter, something calculated. I wanted to expose her for the manipulative, dishonest person she was. I wanted her to lose everything she thought she had, her money, her reputation, her freedom if necessary. I started gathering evidence. I made copies of bank statements, took screenshots of her messages with Mark, and even hired a private investigator to track her movements. I wanted to have all the facts straight when I confronted her again. I knew I had to be careful. She was good at twisting things, and I didn't want her to spin her lies to the authorities or to the kids. I had to be strategic. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act. She was still bitchy and dismissive, telling me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was just jealous. She told everyone I was the one who'd been unfaithful, that I was insecure and controlling. She painted herself as the victim, as the wronged wife. Honestly, I was disgusted by her lies. She was so good at manipulation, she almost convinced herself she was innocent, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her. I knew her game, and I knew I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. I was angry, betrayed, and hurt, more than I'd ever been in my life. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything: her money, the house, her reputation. I was going to fight for what was mine, for the truth, and for the dignity she tried to steal from me. I didn't want to just get revenge for the betrayal. I wanted her to pay for what she did, financially, emotionally, and socially. I wanted her to realize that you can't lie, cheat, and manipulate your way out of consequences. And I was just getting started. Now, after digging through everything, I knew I had to act carefully. Lisa was not just manipulative, she was cunning. She'd already lied her way through the divorce papers, claiming she deserved the house because she worked so hard to keep everything afloat while I was neglectful. That was her biggest lie. She'd been secretly siphoning money into accounts, planning her escape with Mark, and making plans to take as much as she could. Her behavior was escalating. She started acting more bitchy, snapping at the kids, throwing fits over tiny things, trying to paint herself as the victim even more. It seemed like she was trying to guilt me into backing down, but I wasn't going to let her. I had the evidence now, and I was ready to use it. One evening, I decided I'd confront her again, this time with everything laid out. I wanted her to see I wasn't fooling around. I sat her down in the living room, pulled out my phone, and played the recordings I'd made of her conversations with Mark. I showed her the bank statements, the hidden accounts, and the messages where she admitted to planning her escape. Her face twisted with rage. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, crazy, insecure. She everything of course, you're just jealous, she spat. You think I'm cheating on you, but you're the one who's been distant. You're the one who's been neglecting the family. She looked so bitchy, so manipulative, trying to turn it around on me. But I wasn't buying her act anymore. I knew what she was capable of. That night, I decided I'd had enough of her lies. I told her flat out that I was done being played. I told her I'd already contacted a lawyer and that I was going to expose her for what she was: an unfaithful, manipulative wife who'd been stealing from us. I told her I'd fight to keep the house, to protect my kids, and to make sure she paid for her betrayal. She tried to deny everything again, but I had the evidence. I told her I was going to get a court order to freeze her accounts, to prevent her from taking any more money. I also told her that I was planning to file for divorce and that I'd be seeking full custody of the kids. Her bitchy attitude was finally cracking, and I could see her realizing that her game was up. The next day, I met with my lawyer. We started the process of filing for divorce, and I made sure to include all the evidence I'd collected. I wanted everything out in the open: her lies, her manipulation, her theft. I also informed the lawyer about the hidden accounts and the plans she'd made to take our house and money. I told him I wanted to fight for full custody of the kids and to make sure she didn't get away with any more of my money. Meanwhile, Lisa's reactions grew more frantic. She started crying, throwing tantrums, and trying to guilt me into dropping everything. She said I was ruining her life, that I was a terrible husband for accusing her of everything. But I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I'd already seen how far she was willing to go, and I knew I had to be strong. In her bitchy, manipulative way, she kept insisting she was the victim, saying she only cheated because I was emotionally distant, that she was entitled to the money because she'd sacrificed so much, and that I was the one who'd ruined everything. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I'd seen her true colors, and I was done being a pawn in her game. What really hit me hard was realizing how much she'd lied, not just to me but to everyone around her. She convinced her family, her friends, even the lawyer that she was innocent. But I had the proof, and I was determined to make sure she paid for her betrayal. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the fight. I wasn't going to let her destroy what little stability we had left, especially not after she'd stolen so much from us, literally and emotionally. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I threw myself into the legal process, making sure every piece of evidence was airtight. I knew Lisa would try to spin her lies even more now that she saw I was serious. She started coming up with new stories, crying more, trying to guilt me into dropping the divorce. Her bitchy attitude only got worse. She'd lash out at the kids, scream at me for ruining her life, and act like she was the victim of some great injustice. But I wasn't buying any of it anymore. I remember one night she came into the bedroom, tears streaming down her face, and said, "You're just jealous because I found someone better than you," with that snide little smirk she always had when she thought she was winning. That was the moment I realized how deep her manipulations went. She was so convinced she was in the right, she thought she could lie her way out of everything. But I knew better. I'd seen her true face now: selfish, manipulative, and willing to do anything to protect her assets and her new lover. The legal battle was brutal. I filed for full custody, claiming her behavior was unstable and that she'd been hiding assets. I also requested a forensic audit of her accounts, which confirmed she'd been funneling money into accounts she kept secret from me. She had no choice but to face the facts. The evidence was damning. The more she tried to deny, the more it all fell apart. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude turned more hostile. She started making threats, saying she'd ruin me professionally, that she'd make sure I never saw my kids again if she had to. Her bitchy side was on full display, and I began to see just how far she was willing to go. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for months, and now she was trying to turn everything around on me, claiming I was the one cheating, the one neglecting the family, the one who was ruining her life. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to stay strong and keep pushing forward. I met with my lawyer again, and we drafted a detailed plan to expose her lies and protect my interests. I also contacted a private investigator to keep tabs on her whereabouts, just in case she tried to run or hide more money. I knew she'd do anything to get what she wanted. She'd already stolen hundreds of thousands from us, and I wasn't going to let her take the house or the kids without a fight. One day, she snapped. She stormed into the house, yelling and throwing things, her bitchy mask completely gone. She screamed that I was ruining her life, that I was a terrible husband, and that I was the one who cheated first. Just more lies, more manipulation. I stood my ground, calmly showing her the evidence I'd collected. Her face twisted with rage when she realized she couldn't spin her way out of this one. That was the turning point. I knew I had to act fast. I went to court, and the judge granted me temporary full custody of the kids. I also got a restraining order against Lisa, so she couldn't come near us while the case was ongoing. It was a relief, but I knew the fight wasn't over. She was going to try everything to get her way, and I had to be ready for her next move. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated her. I thought I knew my wife, but she was a master manipulator. She used her bitchy attitude, her lies, her tears, and her charm to keep everyone off balance. But I learned that honesty and evidence are your best weapons in a situation like this. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours, your money, your home, your kids. Honestly, I'm exhausted, but I also feel a strange sense of relief. I know there's still a long road ahead, but I'm finally taking control of my life again. I'll never forget the betrayal, but I also won't let her steal my peace or my future. This whole experience has taught me that trust is fragile and that some people will do anything, even lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what they want. And the worst part, I saw that side of her and I'm not going to let her win. The court hearings were intense. Every day I had to sit across from her, watching her bitchy smirk turn into a sneer when she realized I was serious. She kept trying to manipulate the judge, spinning her stories, crying fake tears, claiming she was the victim. But I had the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, witness statements from the private investigator I hired. I knew I had her cornered, and that only made her more desperate. She pushed back hard. She threatened to ruin my reputation, said she'd tell everyone I was the one cheating, that I was an unfit father. She even tried to smear me with lies about how I'd been neglecting the family, all because she wanted to keep her grip on the house and the money she'd stolen. Her bitchy attitude was on full display. She was venomous, manipulative, and relentless. But I stayed focused. I knew I had to keep my cool and play it smart. I worked with my lawyer to gather even more proof that she'd been lying and hiding assets. We filed for full custody of the kids, arguing that her unstable behavior and manipulations made her unfit to care for them alone. I also requested a forensic audit of her accounts, which confirmed she'd been funneling money into secret accounts. That was the nail in the coffin. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior got even more aggressive. She started showing up at our house unannounced, banging on the door, trying to manipulate the kids into turning against me. She told them I was a terrible father, that I was ruining her life, and that she was the victim of some big conspiracy. The kids were confused, and I could see her trying to turn them against me. But I stayed firm, making sure they knew I loved them and that I was doing everything to protect them. One day, she crossed a line. She showed up at the house, screaming at the top of her lungs, demanding I give her the keys to her stuff, and accusing me of stealing from her. I told her to leave, but she refused, trying to guilt me into letting her stay. That's when I called the police. They came, and she was forced to leave. That was the first time I saw her truly lose control. Her bitchy facade cracked, revealing a woman desperately trying to hold on to her lies and manipulations. The judge finally scheduled the final hearing. I prepared everything meticulously, knowing I had the upper hand. I presented all my evidence, including the financial records, the recordings, the witness statements. I argued that Lisa's behavior was unstable and that she'd been lying and manipulating her way to a better position. She tried to defend herself, but her words sounded hollow when compared to the mountain of proof I had. When the judge finally made the ruling, it was clear. Full custody of the kids went to me. The house stayed in my name, and Lisa was ordered to pay back the stolen money, plus a hefty fine for her financial misconduct. She was furious, screaming at the top of her lungs as she left the courtroom, but I didn't care. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated her. I thought I knew my wife, but she was a master manipulator. She used her bitchy attitude, her lies, her tears, and her charm to keep everyone off balance. But I learned that honesty and evidence are your best weapons in a situation like this. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours, your money, your home, your kids. Honestly, I'm exhausted, but I also feel a strange sense of relief. I know there's still a long road ahead, but I'm finally taking control of my life again. I'll never forget the betrayal, but I also won't let her steal my peace or my future. This whole experience has taught me that trust is fragile and that some people will do anything, even lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what they want. And the worst part, I saw that side of her and I'm not going to let her win. Now that everything finally settled, I've had some time to reflect on what's happened. Honestly, it's been one of the most brutal experiences of my life. I thought I knew Lisa, my wife, the mother of my children, and it turns out I was living with someone I barely recognized. She was manipulative, bitchy, and willing to lie, cheat, and steal everything from us just to get her way. When I found out about the affair with Mark, I felt betrayed on every level. But what hurt even more was discovering how deeply she'd schemed to manipulate our divorce, steal our money, and stake claim to our home. Looking back, I realize I was naive to trust her blindly. She's a master at twisting situations, at playing the victim when she's the one who's been lying and scheming all along. That realization was the hardest part, accepting that the person I loved and trusted had been hiding her true self behind a bitchy, manipulative facade. The aftermath has been I've gone from shock and anger to sadness, and eventually, a sense of relief. I'm finally free from her web of lies and manipulation. The house is now in my name, the kids are safe with me, and I have a solid legal footing to rebuild my life. I've learned that sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those closest to us, and that trusting blindly can cost everything. This whole ordeal has taught me a lot about human nature, about the importance of evidence, and about standing up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing to do. I've also learned that revenge isn't always about hurting someone else. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your dignity and making sure they can't hurt you anymore. I had to fight for my family, my finances, and my peace, and I did it. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, trust your gut. Don't ignore the red flags. Gather evidence, stay calm, and don't let manipulative people like her twist the story to their advantage. You can't control what they do, but you can control how you respond. And in the end, honesty and integrity will always win over lies and deceit. I don't regret exposing her. It hurt, but it was necessary. Now I'm focused on rebuilding, more cautious, more aware, and more determined than ever to protect what's mine. Life after betrayal isn't easy, but I know I'll be okay. I've learned that sometimes the worst betrayals teach us the biggest lessons, and that's how I plan to move forward, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next.